I remember back in 2020 when I first started my monk mode, you had a lot of spiritual YouTubers actually. You had like, for example, Thai Spiritual, you had Font Cod for the OGs, you had Spiritual Soul. Like you had a lot of spiritual YouTubers that are actually popping off in the self-improvement industry. Now, when I just turned 16, which was the January of 2020, I started to go on this phase, this monk mode phase. Basically back then it was called like dopamine detox, right? This dopamine detox was basically you getting rid of basically every single bad habit that you used to do. So for example, if you played like video games, you kind of like reduce that. If you smoke weed, you quit that. If you did not exercise, you just went to the gym, so you actually filled that time with something productive. If you did not read any books, you actually read some books, and you got rid of a lot of social media addictions, like for example scrolling on Instagram or Snapchat back in the days, or even TikTok. And that was actually what this entire movement was about. It was actually detoxing from this dopamine addicted social media type of thing that you were doing, because every single time you kind of like scroll on Instagram, a little bit of dopamine is getting released into your brain, and that's actually what keeps stuck into that loop of actually seeing more videos again and again and again and again. And it seems like sometimes you can't stop. That's why, like for example, if you go on TikTok, 1 hour seems like 5 minutes, and then you're scrolling till like 3 o'clock in the morning, and tomorrow you've got to wake up at 7 a.m. So that's of course the downside of it. So in 2020, I actually started to go on this movement of dopamine detox, and that's what I did. I quit all of the social media. I got rid of literally every single thing that was holding me back. I implemented exercise. That was the first time I was actually going to the gym, not serious like I'm doing right now, but that was the first time that I was actually starting to go to the gym. I made a lot of like more friends. I was actually more active in real life instead of comparing myself to other people on Instagram that I've seen. I was just living life, very much passionate about life. I was actually in a very joyful state back in those days, and I got introduced to spirituality, so I was also meditating a lot back in those days because I was actually trying to reconnect with myself again. And it brought a lot of improvements to the table. Like it brought a lot of good things to the table. Like my mental health improved, my physical health improved, my financial situation improved. A lot of things like social situations, my social relationship with my good friends improved. And that was because I was actually getting rid of the phone and I was actually focused more in real life. And that is also when I shaved my head off. So I went completely bald and I just started to focus entirely on myself, which was very good. I did that. I started in January 2020 and I did that till like September 2020. So it's like 8 to 9 months. I genuinely like only focused on myself. The only things I did was, guys, I had a job back then. Also went to school. So school, job, gym, and social, being social, like for example with family or with friends. That's the only thing I did. That's the only thing I've actually focused on. So this monk mode was actually good. Well, you've actually read the title of the video, which was about why monk mode is a scam, and I'm gonna tell it through this story, so stick with me. The second monk mode phase for me started in 2021. Also January, when 2021 it began again, I actually fell back into my old patterns of doing things, of my own patterns of behavior, old patterns of thought, and I fell back into this old like bad routine, like waking up whenever I wanted, playing video games like almost all of the time, and not being productive anymore. So in January 2021, I decided it was enough. I'm gonna join this movement again. So I did another dopamine detox, and this one was actually also pretty great. So I also once again shaved my hair, because that's always what I do if I want to literally focus on only, like for example, the things that I want to improve upon. So for example, gym, my work, my craft, and my job as well. That's what I did. So in 2021, I also shaved my head again, and I started to basically just focus on myself. Did that from like 2021 again to like July 2021. So 6-7 months I only focused on myself. Like I was becoming pretty socially delusional because I could not talk to people anymore because I was so much in my room working. I remember back then schoolwork was actually pretty hard for me, so I needed to learn extra. It was pretty rough time back then. I also went to the gym, also started running a bit, not too much, but I did that dopamine detox till like June, July. Then I went to vacation in Turkey. I dropped off a little bit, and September began my final year, which was my exam year from 2021 to 2022. This monk mode, this second phase of the monk mode, so 2021 monk mode, it was good, but it was not great as the first one, because in 2021 I tried to replicate literally what I've done in 2020, like do the same exact routines. But then what I realized, the thing that I learned actually from that experience is that you cannot really do what you've done in the past because you've outgrown that. And that's a very good lesson to actually keep in life. You cannot always do the same things. If you do something for 3 months and it doesn't work for you on the 4th month, if you're doing something for 3 months and it doesn't work again for like the 4th month, you can say, you need to basically quit that and look at it from another perspective and say, okay, this idea I'm going to implement it in another way instead of actually following old routines, because the old routines can only bring you so far. After that, do something else. You have to actually figure out a new path. Basically, do the things that you were doing. You cannot always do the same things. That's why I feel like monk mode is one of the reasons why I will get to, but I'm gonna just say it right now. That's why I feel like monk mode is a pretty much a scam, because when you focus so much on yourself, you actually neglect the outside world. Focus on yourself and your craft. It's good, right? It has its benefits because you get a lot of results. But the downside is not only relationships and the social things that you have to also acquire in your life, but also you get so much in depth in this routine that you literally start to become delusional about yourself. You start to actually take yourself a little bit too serious. And when you start to take yourself too seriously, once again, you lose the joy of life. Like, you lose the lust of life. And that's what I feel like is wrong with monk mode. Back in 2023 till 2024, I started my third monk mode, which was also my exam year. Tried to only focus on, once again, a couple of things like the gym, school, my job. That was actually the last monk mode that I've done. It's currently May 2025, and I've not really done a monk mode in that way. I've of course been focused on my work. I'm always focused on my work, focused on my craft, focused on school, whatever, focused on my job, but not to the point where I'm basically walking on a destructive path, because I am so unconscious of my actions that I cannot really clearly see the other paths that I can walk on that are like way better than the path that I'm walking on right now. For a lot of people that are actually watching this video and are new to kind of like this basic self-improvement may ask, like, what is actually monk mode? Monk mode is a practice that you go through as a man or a woman, doesn't really matter. You kind of like only focus on a couple of things, like for example 2 or 3 things, and you grind them out, literally like totally, you just grind them out so you get the results out of that thing. But in order to do that, you have to sacrifice other things. That's basically what monk mode is. You basically shave your head and you just focus not so much on your looks and the relationships and the social status, but you just focus on your craft, on your work, on the product that you have to design, on the YouTube videos that you have to make, on the kind of like the course that you want to develop, on your school studies that you want to do. You only focus on that. You neglect basically your social appearance, and you only focus on those kind of like minimalistic thing. That is the basic definition of monk mode. It is this isolation that you go through in order to become a kind of like a stronger version of yourself at the end of it when it comes to your craft, your work, and whatever you have, right? But if monk mode was something that was actually pretty good for myself back in the days, back when I started this, then why am I against it now? That's what I want to talk about right now. So why is monk mode not good, especially for young men like myself? If you're between the age of, for example, even 16 like I started, till like the age of 30, you should not go on monk mode. And the reason for that is because you only have limited time, and already time is against you. Things that I'm saying in this video, you have to only see it from my perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, it's my channel. I'm just giving my perspective on a story that is based on my experiences and the research that I've done. I've got 5 years of experience in this game, so I know basically what I'm talking about, because I've seen both sides of the spectrum. I've seen the positive, I've seen the negative, and now I can decide and I can weigh out a little bit what the positives are and what the negatives are. I can actually see the pros and cons. I'm gonna give you 7 perspectives, 7 principles why monk mode is not good, especially for young men or women, whatever, between the age of like 16 to 30. First one, you become very socially awkward, especially around women. If you're a man like me, you become very like awkward. Basically, not even for women, it's basically for everybody. And the reason for that is because you lock yourself up in this fucking room that you're in, and you're trying to build a business. There's nothing wrong with that. Once again, life, like I've talked about in my previous video, life happens in phases. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have to work on something, if you have to work like 12 to 16 hours, or even beyond that, like 18 hours days, I get that. It has its time, it has its phase, right? But the thing that I'm saying here right now is that when you are locked up in a room where you're isolated, you're only by yourself, and you're trying to build this product, this design, this course, whatever, right? You become very socially awkward. And the reason for that is because you lack social experience. And the reason why you lack the social experience is because you're locking yourself up in a room. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. When you lock yourself up in your room, you get a lot of negative effects, because we as a human beings are social animals. Like, that's the law of human nature. Like, we need to be social. You cannot always do things on a lone wolf mentality. That will bring you far, but not far enough where you actually need to go. You need other people around you. When you become socially awkward, and this happens because you isolate yourself a lot for a long period of time, it's very hard to actually communicate with people. And that's one of the reasons why I think that this is a very downside, and why you should not go in monk mode, is because you become very awkward and you cannot really communicate with people. That's why actually, when I'm working hard on something, I also implement social events in my life. I also go and do things socially. For example, I was going to the party a couple of weeks ago. I'm actually talking to a lot of friends, not even only online, but also in real life. I'm going to places. I'm not only sticking in my room and only working on my business. Once again, life happens in phases, like I talked about in my previous video. If you want to check my previous video, you can do that. You cannot always work 12 to 16 hours a day. Social things in your life. You become very socially awkward if you actually lock yourself up in a room. So my tip for that The alternative for that is to work hard. This video is not neglecting monk mode or neglecting hard work. This is only my perspective of why I'm against it now, because I've been through the perspective. Reality is the best teacher. That's why I feel like if you actually go through the experience and not just watch YouTube videos like mine, you experience it for yourself, then you will see, okay, this works for me or it does not work for me. Monk mode works for a lot of people. It's great. If it works for you, I'm all for it, man. Respect. But it just does not work for me. And the reason for that is because one of the reasons, because you become socially awkward. How you go against that is you actually work hard, but also implement play in your life. You also implement joy in your life. You're not a robot, my friend. You cannot work 12 hours a day every day. You need some play. You need some things to actually focus on beyond work. When you're only focusing on work and you actually are not focusing on anything else, like this neural connections in your mind and your brain cannot fully actually, you cannot come up with new ideas if you're only focused on work. I feel like also speaking from experience, a lot of my ideas actually come from when I'm actually not doing my work, when I'm actually outside doing something else. Like an idea will pop up in my mind and I say, oh shit, that's pretty clever. That happens when I'm actually not doing my work. So tip is, if you're working hard, if you're young, you should work hard, but implement also social things in your life. The second perspective of why I'm against monk mode is because, once again, this comes back to the first point, is because you lose joy in life. Because of this constant routine, this constant depth in routine, like you've planned it out on Google Calendar, Notion, whatever software you're using. You kind of like go in depth into this routine and you lose your life. Like you lose the joy of life. You lose the kind of like the spontaneity in life. You kind of like lose the wilderness, the adventure of life, because everything is planned out. You know everything that's about to happen. I feel like the joy from life comes when you don't know what's going to happen. That's why you do a lot of things that you do, because you don't know what's going to happen. That's what makes life exciting. For example, if you knew what you would be in 5 years from now, would you still follow that path? Of course not, because you need to follow a path that you don't know what you're going to be. Why? Because that's the most exciting path. That's the path that's filled with lessons, with gems, with actually treasures that you find if you walk on that path. The beauty of life lies in the uncertainty. That's why you take the risk, because you don't know. That's what makes life exciting. But if you actually plan your days out every day, as it's time, once again, you can do that. But if you do it every day, you lose the joy of life. You become so much depth in routine that you neglect basically the adventure of life. You stop chasing, you stop going around in the world, you stop going for adventures. You just start, okay, it's 7 a.m. right now, I need to work till 10 a.m. then I need to do this. It's great. Have a routine. I'm not saying be fucking like a dog without a boss and just running around. Do it in a way where you don't get trapped by it, because you can get trapped very easily by your own mind, because you take yourself once again too seriously. When you take yourself too seriously, the mind traps itself. You come like once again stuck in this four-wall barrier, which is basically your mind. In order to actually escape that, you need to go beyond the mind, which is of course very hard and it takes a lot of practice. I'm not even beyond the mind itself. But the first step that you can do in order to do that, that's what I've done, is basically to stop focusing so much on routine. Go more with the flow. That's the second reason why I feel like monk mode is a scam. Third reason is because isolation is dangerous. All of these points are actually interconnected with each other. Isolation is very dangerous because, once again, you become trapped by your own mind. You become trapped by illusionary thoughts that accompany your mind. You kind of like don't see the distance between yourself, which is the observer, and the mind accompanies these thoughts. And that happens when you meditate a lot. But if you don't have that, it's very hard to actually distinguish yourself from the mind, right? And when the mind takes itself too seriously, you fall back into old patterns of behavior. You take yourself very seriously. You think that the world is against you and everything is on your shoulders. It's not. It's just based on the illusions of your mind. And this is what happens when you isolate yourself too much. You become too much in your head. You think too much. That's basically one of my problems. You think too much. And when you think too much, it becomes dangerous. Because once again, this comes back to like we're going in a circle right now, but this comes literally back to you taking yourself too seriously. When you isolate yourself and the only thing that you see is your room, you get stuck in your head. That's the third reason why monk mode is a scam. Fourth reason is because you're not meant to be a lone wolf. Like, you're a social animal. You are a social animal, my friend. Like, that is basically, once again, the law of human nature. You need other people around you. You can go far, once again, with yourself, absolutely, but not to the point where you actually want to go. You need other people around you. You need other people to support you. You need other people to actually disagree with you. You need other people to criticize you. Learn some important lessons in the process. That's what you need. But you don't have that when you're basically by yourself. You can be hard on yourself, but it's not the same if somebody actually critiques your work. Like, say, okay, that maybe that can be different. Say, oh shit, I've never actually thought about that. Yeah, positive feedback loop. The fifth reason why monk mode is a scam is because you need to project yourself to the world. The world does not have to project itself to you. It's not the world's duty to do that. As a young man, you need to literally project yourself to the world. You need to go after things. You need to put yourself out there. That's one of the reasons why I'm making a YouTube video, why I'm actually on YouTube, is because I want to put myself out there. Fuck it if I get like 10 views or something, or if I get 1 million views. It's not about the views, my friend. It's not about the likes. I don't give a shit about that. It's about 2 things. It's overcoming this fear of posting, and hopefully if somebody watches my video and actually get inspired by it, to become more of him or herself. That's basically my goal. To inspire people, to learn from my mistakes, and to actually basically live the best lives that they can, but to also move beyond this hindrance, this fear of mine to not post. That's the reasons why I'm on YouTube. It's not because of the fucking views, the likes. I mean, it helps. I'm not against that, but the reason why this actually connects to this point is because I'm putting myself out there. I'm putting myself in the uncomfortable situation of being seen. Yeah, people are gonna see my face on YouTube. So what? My friends are gonna see my face. So what? My family's gonna see my face. So what? I don't care anymore, my friend. The reason for that is because basically moving beyond this hindrance, this fear of the mind that is actually projecting itself to myself. Life in itself is just a big mind play. Like, you're playing a game with yourself, and it's very funny when you're not conscious of that. But when you become conscious of the fact, you start to take yourself less seriously and start to actually laugh at reality, because you realize that all of your life you actually been unconscious, acted on unconscious beliefs that are tied to your definitions. We're not gonna go in depth about spirituality right now, maybe another video. The world's not gonna come to you. You need to put yourself out there. You need to be seen. We're living in a time where everybody's against the ego. The ego, go in depth about the ego. Yes, the ego has its negative sides to it. Always want to be seen, always having the spotlight. That's not good. But don't be so afraid. Don't be so trying to be so moral to not be seen. Yeah, I'm not good enough for that. I'm not gonna do it. This shit is not for me. No, go for it. Nietzsche once said in one of his quotes that I know of no better life purpose than to perish in attempting the great and the impossible. Can you even just silence for that quote? That is literally the best life quest. To go for something, to put yourself out there, knowing that you might not make it, but just go in there because you've got some fucking balls. Just doing it, knowing you might maybe fail. So what? You've lived a more exciting life than fucking 90% of people. If you just go there, do it again and again, if you put yourself out there into the world, knowing you might never make it, knowing you might fail, all of these limiting beliefs, all of these failures, all of these fears, just put that aside and just go. I just cannot imagine a better life than that. Just and sitting at the brink of your destiny. You're old now, you've experienced life, you've seen everything in life, you've tried but never actually succeeded to the point you want, but tried genuinely, like you've tried genuinely your best, and then you die. That's the greatest life. Not the life that you don't care. It's the life that you actually go for it in attempting something impossible, knowing that you might fail. That's why you need to put yourself out there. Who cares if you fail, my friend? There are no opinions. You're just basically talking to yourself. The 6th reason why monk mode is a scam is because you lack experience. I see a lot of YouTubers in this self-improvement space like, yeah bro, go on monk mode, you're gonna make 10K a month. No, if you're young, like my age, just turned 21, you don't need to go on monk mode. It has its phases, right? So if you're very totally like dopamine addicted, maybe you need to be do a little bit of dopamine detox. I get that, but if you're young, you don't need to go on monk mode. And the reason for that is because as a young man, not only do you need to project yourself to the outside world, you need to seek as much experience of the world as possible. The reason for that is because when you start out, your experience is very little. But when you go out into the real world and actually see the entire spectrum, you see the entire left and right view of the spectrum, you can distinguish what you like and do not like. You never know what the good is when you've never experienced the bad, and you can never know what the bad is if you've never experienced the good. Law of polarity, everything exists with its polar opposite. The reason why I feel like, once again, you need to seek as much experience as possible is because you develop yourself in as many domains in life as possible. You get a little bit of knowledge from that branch, you get a little bit of knowledge from that branch, you go into this career, maybe it's not for you, now you've experienced that, now you've seen the other side of it, okay, maybe that's not for me, so I'm gonna try another path. You've got infinite tries, my friend. Of course, time is against you, your time is limited, but if you're being smart about this and you project yourself to the outside world, you get seen, you throw yourself out there, and you basically seek as much experience as possible, whether it be positive or negative, you get a glimpse of life, it's gonna bring you very far. Monk mode, sitting in your room all day, building a 10K per month business, it's not gonna bring you far in life. You get the money, but it's gonna feel empty. Why? Because you don't have that experience. You don't have that lust for life. You're just a guy in his room making 10K a month. It sounds great, right? But it also brings a lot of other problems with you in your life. Like me, at the end of the day, this 10K per month shit, a lot of YouTubers actually push. I've nothing against it, basically. I'm all for that. But you also have to look at it from a negative perspective. You cannot always look at it from a positive perspective, because the positive cannot exist without the negative. But when we look at it from a negative perspective, when you get a 10K per month, it brings a lot of other problems within your life as well. You're never free of problems, my friend. You're never free of problems. That's just not gonna happen. So the best thing that you can do right now is to try to become a problem solver in the real world. That's gonna bring you far. That's what I'm trying to do. That's why I'm recording my journey here. That's why I'm on YouTube. So the 6th point, to summarize it, you lack experience. And because you lack experience, you don't need to fucking lock yourself up in a room. You need to experience as much as possible in this real world. How do you do that? By throwing yourself out there. Literally not even thinking. Stop thinking so much. Throw yourself out there. Like first act and then reflect instead of first reflecting and then acting. That's the philosophy of basically how I live. First act and then reflect instead of, oh shit, instead of like going on this entire strategy method of like 3 months making a strategy. If I do this, no bro, once again you're planning too much. You lose the joy of life. Unless if that's your passion, go for it. So the most important asset in your life is basically the 7th point, which comes back to the 6th point, is the most important asset in your life is experience. The reason why I can talk in front of a camera right now and say these things is because of experience, and of course also because of the research I've done and all of these things. But it comes down to experience. You need experience in life. You can multiply that when you go out there in the world, when you throw yourself into the wilderness and see if you can make it out alive. That's what is passion, my friend. That is what brings joy into your life. Remember that. Your asset, the most important asset you have in life, is your experience. So what is the solution for monk mode? Once again, you have to first identify what phase you're in life. Everything happens in phases. You cannot always, once again, if you watch my previous video, you cannot always work 12 hours a day, but you cannot always work 4 hours a day. You need some form of balance, or maybe you need to go a little bit off balance and work 12 hours a day, or you need to maybe go a little bit off balance and work 4 hours a day. But at the end of the day, everything in life comes back to balance. And that's what I was so ignorant about, because when I was on these monk modes, I saw balance as something demonic, something very bad, because balance is for weak people, bro. Balance is for pussies. No. Is there something as work-life balance? I don't know. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I'm just a neutral observer here. But what I can give to you, the lesson that I can give to you based on my 5 years of experience is, do not focus on one thing. Focus on as many things as possible. You try to live this essentialism life where you basically focus on maybe 2 or 3 things, but that is what keeps you stuck, because you cannot pressure reality in only 3 to 4 things. Reality is too big for that. In reality, it will show you what you need to experience at what moment in time. You can maybe differentiate that into as many aspects as you like, but reality itself is one big thing. And one big thing cannot be composed to 2 or little 3 things. It can be actually composed to as many things as you like. So for example, why am I saying this? It is because the basic solution for monk mode is not to focus on 2 things, but to focus on 6 things, 8 things, 7 things. How many things you like? That's what I feel like is so wrong with monk mode, bro. You think one-dimensionally. Life in itself is multi-dimensional, which means that you cannot only phrase it to one thing. You cannot phrase life into doing only one thing for the rest of your life. It happens in phases. Maybe this phase you need to do that more, maybe that phase you need to do that more. But what it comes down to is differentiating in as many aspects as possible and gaining a positive advantage out of that. Not even based on a result, but based on a kind of like an inner peace that you get when you're not only focused on 2 things, you're kind of like stuck in your room all day because the isolation of the 10K per month thing. Literally focusing on many things as possible will literally bring joy in your life. If you just focus on, for example, being social, going out, not doing some stupid shit, but just going out. Focus on martial arts. If you focus on boxing, if you focus on content creation, if you focus on coding, if you focus on studying, if you focus on as many things as possible, that is what will bring joy in your life, because you're not thinking in one-dimensional perspective. You're thinking in a multi-dimensional perspective. And that's basically the alternative for monk mode. So once again, to summarize this, what is the alternative for monk mode? The alternative for monk mode is to not think one-dimensionally, but to think multi-dimensional. What do I mean by that? Is to throw yourself out there into the world, see first what you like, what you do not like, experience both sides of the spectrum, gain as much experience as possible, and then you can differentiate that into smaller aspects, and then you can focus on those. If those things are, for example, 8 things, like for example, you've got the gym, you want to be a bodybuilder, you want to also have a social, like you want to also have a relationship, maybe you want to go to school and like go to university, if you want to do content creation, if you want to do email marketing, I'm just saying something, you can. The point is to not focus and not differentiate life into only basically a couple of things. Life is too big for that. Focus on as many things as possible. That's what I basically want to tell. So the alternative for monk mode is not focusing on 2-3 things, but finding balance in as many things as possible. Thank you very much. And find the joy in the process.